My name is Lauren Whitaker, and I'm 29 years old. I live in a small apartment in Portland, Oregon, where the rain falls almost as consistently as my mother's disappointment in me. If you asked me to pinpoint the exact moment I realized I would always be second in my own family, I'd probably say it was when I was 7 years old, standing in our kitchen while my mother, Cheryl, hung Madison's finger painting on the refrigerator and pushed mine to the side to make room. "Madison's looks more like a real house," she said, not even looking at me. "Yours is, well, it's abstract." I was 7. I didn't even know what abstract meant, but I knew it wasn't good by the way she said it. That was 22 years ago, and nothing has changed. Madison is still the golden child, still the one who gets the praise, the attention, the love that seems to flow so naturally from our mother, and I'm still standing on the sidelines, watching it all happen like a spectator in my own life. 3 weeks ago, I walked into our family home on Maple Street, the same house where I grew up, where my childhood bedroom still has the faded pink wallpaper I begged to change when I was 16. The autumn air in Portland was crisp, and the leaves were turning that brilliant orange that makes tourists fall in love with Oregon. I was carrying a bottle of champagne and wearing my best blazer, the navy blue one I'd bought specifically for important occasions. This was supposed to be one of those occasions. I'd been working at Henderson and Associates, a mid-sized law firm downtown, for 3 years. 3 years of 60-hour weeks, of staying late to perfect briefs that partners would barely glance at, of bringing coffee to meetings where I wasn't allowed to speak. 3 years of proving myself over and over again, each small victory feeling monumental because I'd earned it entirely on my own. And finally, it had paid off. Jonathan Henderson himself, the founding partner, the man whose name was literally on the building, had called me into his office the previous Monday. "Lauren," he'd said, leaning back in his leather chair with that smile that could either make or break careers. "I've been watching your work on the Morrison case. Your research was thorough. Your arguments were solid. And frankly, you saved us from what could have been a very expensive mistake." My heart had started racing. 3 months of working on that case, diving deep into property law precedents that made my eyes burn from staring at computer screens until midnight. I'd found a loophole that no one else had noticed, a small detail in a 1987 ruling that completely changed the trajectory of our defense. "I'm promoting you to senior associate," he'd continued. "It comes with a raise, your own office, and a partnership track if you keep performing at this level." I'd barely managed to keep my composure in his office, but the moment I stepped into the elevator, I'd let out a laugh that was part joy, part relief, part disbelief. Senior associate. At 29. It wasn't just a promotion. It was validation that all those years of doubt, all those moments of wondering if I was good enough, had been worth it. That's why I was standing in my mother's kitchen that Thursday evening, champagne in hand, ready to share the best news of my professional life. "Mom," I called out as I entered through the side door, the same entrance I'd used countless times as a child. The house smelled like cinnamon and vanilla. She was baking something, which usually meant she was in a good mood. "In here, Lauren," she called from the kitchen. I found her at the island, mixing what looked like cake batter. Her gray hair was pulled back in the same practical bun she'd worn for as long as I could remember, and she was wearing her favorite apron, the one with tiny strawberries that Madison had given her for Christmas 3 years ago. "Hey," I said, setting the champagne on the counter with what I hoped was a meaningful flourish. "I brought something to celebrate with." She glanced at the bottle, then back at her mixing bowl. "Celebrate what?" "I got promoted," I said, the words tumbling out faster than I'd intended. "To senior associate. Jonathan Henderson told me I'm on the partnership track now, and I get my own office, and that's nice, and honey," she said. But her tone was the same one she'd use if I'd told her I'd found a good parking spot downtown. She kept mixing the batter, the wooden spoon scraping against the ceramic bowl in a rhythm that somehow felt dismissive. I stood there for a moment, waiting for more, waiting for her to look up, to smile, to ask questions about what this meant for my future. When she didn't, I tried again. "I was thinking maybe we could have a small party this weekend. Nothing big, just family. Maybe order some food from that Italian place you like, invite Madison and a party." She finally looked up, and there was something in her expression I couldn't quite read. "For a promotion?" "Well, yes. I mean, it's a big deal for me. I've been working toward this for—" "Lauren." She set down the spoon and turned to face me fully, and I immediately recognized the look. It was the same expression she'd worn when I'd asked if I could invite friends over for my 16th birthday. when I'd suggested we celebrate my college graduation with more than just a dinner at Applebee's, when I'd tried to share any achievement that mattered to me. Your sister deserves the party, not you." The words hit me like cold water. I actually took a step back, as if the physical distance might somehow lessen the impact. "What?" "Madison just finished her art degree," she continued, as if explaining something obvious to a child. "After all those years of struggling to find her path, she finally graduated. That's worth celebrating. A work promotion is just, well, it's just what you're supposed to do, isn't it? It's your job to get promoted." I stared at her, feeling something crack inside my chest. Madison's art degree, the one she'd taken 7 years to complete because she kept changing majors, kept dropping classes, kept deciding that maybe college wasn't for her after all. The degree that my mother and I had essentially funded through a combination of family loans and my own contributions when Madison couldn't afford tuition. Just what I'm supposed to do," I repeated, my voice barely above a whisper. "Don't be dramatic, Lauren. You know what I mean." She picked up the spoon again, dismissing me with a gesture. "Madison has struggled so much more than you have. Everything has always come easily to you. School, work, all of it. But Madison has had to fight for everything. When she accomplishes something, it means more." I wanted to laugh. Everything came easily to me. The countless nights I'd spent studying while Madison was out with friends, the student loans I was still paying off while Madison's education had been funded by family, the 3 years of proving myself at the law firm while Madison floated between part-time jobs and finding herself. "I've worked incredibly hard for this, Mom. This isn't just happening to me. I earned it." "Of course you did," she said, but her tone suggested the opposite. "I'm proud of you, honey. But a party, that seems excessive." I picked up the champagne bottle, my hands shaking slightly. The label was starting to peel where condensation had made it damp, and I realized I'd been gripping it too tightly. "When is Madison's party?" I asked quietly. "Next Saturday. I was thinking we could use the dining room. Maybe get some of those little sandwiches from the bakery she likes." And I found the perfect decorations online. They have these beautiful banners that say, "Congratulations, graduate," in gold lettering. Gold lettering. Little sandwiches from the bakery. The dining room, which we only used for special occasions. All for a degree that had taken 7 years and countless extensions. I thought about my own college graduation 5 years ago. We'd gone to Applebee's afterward, just the 3 of us, and my mother had spent most of the dinner talking about how worried she was about Madison finding direction in life. "I should go," I said, heading toward the door. "Don't be like this, Lauren. You're being sensitive." I stopped at the threshold, my hand on the doorknob. "I'm not being sensitive, Mom. I'm being human." I drove home through the Portland streets, past the coffee shops and food trucks, and all the places that make this city feel like home to so many people. But sitting in my car at red lights, watching people laugh with their friends outside breweries, I felt more alone than I had in years. My apartment is small, but it's mine. I decorated it carefully over the past 2 years, choosing furniture that made me feel successful and independent. That night, though, it felt hollow. I put the champagne in the refrigerator next to leftovers from earlier in the week and tried to convince myself that my mother's reaction didn't matter. But it did matter. It mattered so much that I called in sick to work the next day and spent it on my couch, staring at the ceiling and wondering why I kept expecting different results from the same people. That was Thursday. On Friday, I dragged myself back to work, determined to focus on something I could control. The Morrison case was wrapping up, and I had 3 new files waiting on my desk. I threw myself into research, staying late, skipping lunch, doing anything to keep my mind off the conversation with my mother. It was almost 7 p.m. when my phone buzzed with a text from Madison. "Mom told me about your promotion. That's so cool. Can't wait to see your new office." 3 exclamation points. Madison always used 3 exclamation points when she was trying to be enthusiastic about something she didn't really understand. I stared at the message for a long time before responding with a simple thanks. She texted back immediately. "We should celebrate. Want to grab drinks this weekend?" I almost laughed. Madison wanted to celebrate with drinks. Casual, low-key, the kind of thing we did on random Tuesday nights when she was bored. Meanwhile, she was getting gold banners and little sandwiches from the bakery. "Can't this weekend," I typed back. "Your graduation party, remember?" "Oh, right. Are you excited? Mom is going all out." I turned off my phone without responding. That Saturday, I woke up to gray skies and the steady drizzle that defines Portland winters. I'd planned to spend the day at the office, catching up on case files, but instead found myself walking through Laurelhurst Park, letting the rain soak through my jacket. There's something about Portland rain that either makes you feel romantic and contemplative or completely miserable, and that day it was definitely the latter. My phone kept buzzing with updates from the party. Photos of Madison beaming next to her cake, videos of my mother giving a speech about perseverance and following your dreams, pictures of relatives I hadn't seen in months, who had apparently all made time for this celebration. I turned off my phone and walked home in the rain, my shoes squelching with every step. That night, as I sat in my apartment eating takeout Thai food and watching Netflix, I made a decision. I was done waiting for my family to see my worth. I was done expecting validation from people who had never learned how to give it. And I was especially done feeling sorry for myself. Monday morning, I walked into Henderson & Associates with my shoulders back and my head high. I had work to do, cases to win, and a career to build. If my family couldn't celebrate my success, then I would find people who could. I just didn't expect to find them so soon. Monday morning at Henderson & Associates started like any other day, except it didn't. I arrived at 7:30 a.m., an hour before most people, because I'd always found comfort in the quiet of an empty office. The elevator hummed its familiar tune as it carried me to the 8th floor, and I walked through the reception area where Jennifer wouldn't arrive for another hour, her desk still pristine and organized from Friday evening. But when I turned the corner toward my old cubicle, the cramped space I'd occupied for 3 years, wedged between the copy machine and Mark Sullivan's overflow files, I stopped short. There was a maintenance worker installing a nameplate on the door of Office 814. Lauren Whitaker, Senior Associate, it read in clean, professional lettering. My office. My actual office. I stood there for a moment, briefcase in hand, staring at my name on that door like it might disappear if I looked away. 3 years of dreaming about this moment, and now that it was here, I felt an unexpected surge of emotion that had nothing to do with the promotion itself and everything to do with the fact that no one from my family would ever see it. Miss Whitaker. I turned to find David Chen, one of the junior associates, approaching with a stack of files and a smile that seemed genuinely warm. "Congratulations on the promotion," he said. "I heard about the Morrison case. Brilliant work on that property precedent. I actually referenced your research methodology in a brief I'm writing for the Patterson matter." "You did?" The surprise in my voice was embarrassing, but David didn't seem to notice. "Absolutely. The way you cross-reference those early rulings with the recent appellate decisions, it's exactly the kind of thorough analysis that wins cases." He shifted the files to one arm and extended his hand. "I don't think we've officially met. David Chen, Junior Associate. I started here about 6 months ago." I shook his hand, struck by how different this felt from interactions with my family. Here was someone who knew my work, who respected my methodology, who saw value in my contributions. "It's nice to meet you officially," I said. "And thank you. That means a lot. Would you like to grab coffee later? I'm working on a contract dispute that has some similarities to your Morrison research, and I'd love to get your perspective if you have time." Before I could answer, I heard footsteps behind me and turned to see Jonathan Henderson approaching, flanked by Patricia Reeves, the office manager, and Sarah Kim, one of the senior partners. "Lauren," Jonathan said, his voice carrying that authoritative warmth that made him such an effective lawyer. "Ready to see your new workspace?" Patricia stepped forward with a key and a smile. "We moved your files over the weekend, and IT set up your computer this morning. You should have access to the senior associate database now, plus the partner conference room booking system." She unlocked the door and pushed it open, and I followed them inside, David trailing behind us with obvious curiosity. The office was small but perfect. A real desk, not a cubicle setup, but an actual wooden desk with drawers and space for personal items, 2 client chairs positioned across from it, a bookshelf along one wall, currently empty but full of possibility, and most importantly, a window, a real window with a view of the street below, where I could watch people walking to work, see the changing weather, feel connected to the world outside these walls. "The previous occupant left some law books," Patricia was saying, gesturing toward a box in the corner. "You're welcome to keep them, or we can relocate them to the library." "I'll keep them," I said quickly. Books were good. Books made a place feel permanent, established, real, excellent. Jonathan moved to the window and looked out at the street. "Lauren, I want you to know that this promotion isn't just recognition for past work. We're investing in your future here. Sarah and I have been discussing the partnership track, And if you continue performing at this level, we expect you'll be eligible for junior partner consideration within 3 years. 3 years. Junior partner. The words felt surreal. I won't let you down, I said. And I meant it with every fiber of my being. We know you won't. Sarah stepped forward, her expression serious but kind. Your dedication hasn't gone unnoticed, Lauren. You're here early, you stay late, and you deliver quality work consistently. That combination is rarer than you might think. After they left, David lingered in my doorway. This is incredible, he said, looking around the space. You must be so proud. Proud. Such a simple word. But it hit me unexpectedly hard. When was the last time someone had told me I should be proud of myself? When was the last time I'd felt proud of something without having to justify or diminish it? I am, I said, and realized I meant it. I really am. That coffee offer still stands, David said. Maybe we could make it a lunch celebration instead. There's a great sandwich place around the corner. And honestly, I think achievements like this deserve to be acknowledged properly. I looked at him. Really looked at him. David was probably around my age, with kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses and an enthusiasm for the law that reminded me of myself 3 years ago. But more than that, he was offering something my own family hadn't. Recognition. Celebration. The simple acknowledgement that my success mattered. I'd like that, I said. I'd like that, very much. The rest of the morning flew by in a blur of settling into my new space, organizing files, and returning emails. But at 12:30, I found myself walking down the street with David, heading toward a small cafe I'd passed hundreds of times but never entered. So, David said, as we claimed a table by the window, tell me about the Morrison case. I've read your brief, but I'd love to hear about your research process. For the next hour, we talked about law, not about family dynamics, or who deserved what, or whether my achievements were worthy of celebration. Just law. David asked thoughtful questions about my methodology, shared insights from his own cases, and listened, really listened, when I explained the late-night revelation that had led to finding the crucial precedent. That's the kind of breakthrough that makes this job worth it, he said, when I finished describing the moment I'd found the 1987 ruling. There's nothing quite like that feeling when all the pieces suddenly click into place. Exactly, I said, surprised by how good it felt to have someone understand. I called my colleague Rebecca at home that night. It was almost midnight, because I couldn't wait until morning to tell someone. And what did she say? She said I was brilliant, and that she'd known I'd figure it out. I smiled at the memory. Then she told me to get some sleep because I'd need to be sharp for the presentation the next day. Rebecca sounds like a good colleague to have. She is. She's actually been here longer than anyone except the partners. She took me under her wing when I started, showed me the ropes, never made me feel stupid for asking questions. David nodded thoughtfully. It makes such a difference, doesn't it? Having people who believe in you, who celebrate your wins instead of diminishing them. The comment was casual, but something in his tone made me look at him more closely. Speaking from experience, I asked. He was quiet for a moment, stirring his coffee even though he'd already added cream. My family thinks I'm wasting my education on a boring corporate job, he said finally. They wanted me to go into medicine like my father and grandfather. When I told them I was passionate about contract law, my dad actually laughed. I'm sorry. That must have been difficult. It was. But you know what I've learned? Sometimes the people who are supposed to support you the most are the ones who understand you the least, and sometimes you find your real support system in unexpected places. I thought about that as we walked back to the office. David was right. The past few hours had felt more validating than anything I'd experienced with my family in years. Here was someone who understood my work, who asked questions because he was genuinely interested, who saw my promotion as something worth celebrating with a proper lunch instead of dismissing it as just what I was supposed to do. When we returned to Henderson and Associates, I found a small package on my desk with a note from Rebecca. Congratulations on the promotion. You've earned every bit of this success. Our inside was a beautiful pen set, professional but elegant, the kind of gift that said someone had put thought into choosing something meaningful. I picked up the accompanying card and read her handwritten message. For signing all the important documents in your bright future. I had to sit down for a moment. This pen set probably cost more than the bottle of champagne I'd brought to my mother's house, champagne that was probably still sitting unopened in her refrigerator. Rebecca, who had no familial obligation to care about my success, had taken the time to choose a gift that acknowledged my achievement and my potential. My phone buzzed with a text message. For a moment, I hoped it might be my mother, maybe having second thoughts about her reaction, maybe wanting to plan a belated celebration, but it was Madison. "Can you cover my car payment this month? I'm a little short after graduation expenses. I'll pay you back." I stared at the message, feeling something shift inside me. Madison needed money. Again, money to cover expenses related to the graduation that had warranted a full family celebration, while my promotion had been dismissed as routine. Money that I would provide. Again, because that's what I always did. But this time, something was different. This time, I was sitting in my own office, surrounded by evidence of my professional success, having just had lunch with a colleague who respected my work and saw my achievements as worthy of celebration. I typed back, "I can't cover it this time. Maybe ask Mom and Dad." The response came immediately. "What? Lauren, you know they're tight on money right now. I really need help." "I understand, but I have my own expenses to manage." My phone rang. "Madison." "Hey," I answered. "What's going on with you?" Madison's voice had that edge she got when she didn't immediately get what she wanted. "It's just $200. You make way more than me." "Madison, I've been covering your car payments for 8 months. Before that, it was your phone bill. Before that, it was rent money. I've been in school. You know I couldn't work full-time and focus on my degree. I worked all through college," I said quietly. "2 jobs, actually. That's different. School was always easier for you." There it was again, that familiar refrain that dismissed my efforts and elevated her struggles. But this time, instead of accepting it, I felt something I'd never felt before. Anger. "School wasn't easier for me, Madison. I worked harder. I can't believe you're being like this. Over $200. "It's not about the money," I said, though I wasn't entirely sure what it was about. I can't keep doing this." She hung up without saying goodbye. I sat in my new office, looking out my new window, and felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Proud of myself for setting a boundary. Terrified, but proud. An hour later, my phone buzzed with a text from my mother. "Madison told me you refused to help with her car payment. She's very upset. This isn't like you, Lauren." I read the message 3 times before responding. "I've been helping with her car payments for 8 months, Mom. I think that's been generous enough. She's just getting on her feet after graduation. Family helps family." "I agree. Family should help family. It shouldn't be one-sided." I waited for a response, but none came. At 5:30, I was packing up my briefcase when David knocked on my doorframe. "How was your first day in the new office?" he asked. I looked around the space, my space, with its window and its bookshelf and its nameplate on the door. I thought about lunch, about Rebecca's thoughtful gift, about the partner's confidence in my future. I thought about setting boundaries with Madison and feeling proud instead of guilty. "It was a good day," I said. "A really good day. Want to grab a drink to celebrate? There's a place called Murphy's about 2 blocks from here. Nothing fancy, but they have excellent fish and chips." I thought about going home to my empty apartment, about fielding more texts from Madison, or calls from my mother, about spending the evening second-guessing my decision to finally say no. "You know what?" I said, grabbing my jacket. "That sounds perfect." Murphy's turned out to be exactly what David had described. Nothing fancy, but warm and welcoming, with dark wood and soft lighting and the kind of atmosphere that invited conversation. We found a table in the corner, and David ordered fish and chips while I opted for shepherd's pie. "So," David said when our drinks arrived, "what's next for the newly promoted senior associate?" "Honestly, I'm not entirely sure," I admitted. "I've been so focused on getting the promotion that I haven't thought much about what comes after. Partnership track, right? That's what Mr. Henderson mentioned. 3 years. If I keep performing at this level." "You will," David said with such certainty that I looked at him in surprise. "How can you be so sure?" "Because I've watched you work. Because I've seen how you approach problems, how thoroughly you research, how you never settle for good enough. People like that don't suddenly stop being excellent." I felt warmth spread through my chest that had nothing to do with the wine. "Thank you. I needed to hear that today." "Rough day with the family?" he asked gently. I hadn't planned to tell him about the car payment situation, about Madison's call, about my mother's text. But something about David's genuine interest, about the way he listened without judgment, made the words spill out. When I finished, he was quiet for a long moment. "It sounds like you did the right thing," he said finally. "Setting boundaries isn't easy, especially with family, but it's necessary." "I feel guilty," I admitted. Of course you do. You've been trained to feel guilty when you don't prioritize everyone else's needs above your own. But guilt isn't always a reliable indicator of wrongdoing. We talked until Murphy's started to empty out, until the conversation had moved from family dynamics to career goals, to books we'd read to places we wanted to travel. David was easy to talk to, thoughtful in his responses, and genuinely interested in what I had to say. It occurred to me that this was the longest conversation I'd had in months where I felt truly heard. When we finally left the restaurant, the Portland evening air was crisp and clear, unusual for this time of year. "Thank you for today," I said, as we stood outside Murphy's. "For lunch, for the drink, for key, for listening. It's been a long time since I've had a day that felt this good." "Thank you for sharing it with me," David said. "And Lauren, you should be proud of yourself, not just for the promotion, but for standing up for yourself today. That takes courage." I walked home through the quiet Portland streets, past the coffee shops closing for the evening, and the restaurants just hitting their dinner rush. My phone remained mercifully quiet. No texts from Madison, no calls from my mother, no family drama requiring my immediate attention and emotional energy. Instead, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Excited about tomorrow. Excited to sit at my desk in my office, to tackle new cases, to continue building a career that was entirely my own achievement. Excited to see David again, to continue a friendship that felt supportive and genuine. That night, I unpacked Rebecca's pen set and placed it prominently on my desk at home, right next to my laptop where I could see it while I worked on evening case reviews. It was a small thing, but it felt symbolic. A reminder that I was valued, that my work mattered, that I deserved recognition for my achievements. For the first time in my adult life, I was beginning to understand what it felt like to be truly proud of myself, and it felt incredible. The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of productivity and small victories. My new office became my sanctuary, a place where my competence was never questioned, and my contributions were not only welcomed, but actively sought out. David and I fell into an easy routine of coffee conversations and collaborative case discussions, while Rebecca continued to be the mentor I hadn't realized I desperately needed. But it was on a rainy Thursday afternoon, exactly 16 days after my promotion, that everything shifted in a way I could never have anticipated. I was deep in research for a complex intellectual property case when my phone rang. The caller ID showed Jonathan Henderson's extension, which was unusual. Partners typically communicated through their assistants or email. "Lauren, could you come to my office when you have a moment?" His voice carried an energy I couldn't quite identify. "And bring the Westfield Industries file." Westfield Industries. The name alone was enough to make any associate at our firm pay attention. They were one of Portland's largest tech companies, and their legal work represented a significant portion of Henderson and Associates' annual revenue. I'd never worked on any of their matters directly. Those cases were typically handled by senior partners and the most experienced associates. I grabbed the file, checked my appearance in my office window's reflection, and made my way to Jonathan's corner office. His assistant, Marie, waved me through with a smile that seemed more knowing than usual. "Ah, Lauren, come in." Jonathan stood as I entered, which was also unusual. "Please, have a seat. Can Marie get you anything? Coffee? Water?" "I'm fine, thank you." I settled into one of his client chairs. The Westfield file balanced on my lap, trying to read his expression. "You wanted to see the Westfield file." "I did, but more importantly, I wanted to talk to you about Westfield Industries themselves." He leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled in front of him in that classic lawyer pose. "They're expanding their legal department and looking to hire a senior in-house counsel position. The role would involve overseeing contract negotiations, managing regulatory compliance, and serving as primary liaison with outside counsel, essentially us, on major litigation matters." I nodded, unsure why he was telling me this. "That sounds like a significant role." "It is. The compensation package is exceptional. We're talking about a 40% salary increase from your current position, full benefits, stock options, and the kind of corporate culture that actually supports work-life balance." He paused, studying my face. "They asked me to recommend someone from our firm, someone with strong research skills, attention to detail, and the ability to think strategically about complex legal issues." My heart started beating faster. "And you thought of someone who might be interested. Lauren, I recommended you." The words hung in the air between us. Jonathan Henderson, founding partner of a prestigious law firm, had recommended me, Lauren Whitaker, the woman whose own mother thought her achievements didn't merit celebration, for a senior position at one of Portland's most successful companies. I don't know what to say. Say you'll consider it. Margaret Chen, she's their chief legal officer, would like to meet with you next week. Unofficially, of course. Just a conversation to see if there might be mutual interest. Margaret Chen. The name was vaguely familiar, and then I remembered why. She'd been featured in Portland Business Journal last year as one of the city's most influential women in tech, a powerhouse who'd built Westfield's legal department from the ground up. Mr. Henderson, I'm incredibly honored that you'd recommend me, but I have to ask, why me? There are senior associates here with more experience, more years, perhaps, but not more talent, and certainly not more dedication. He leaned forward, his expression serious. Lauren, in my 30 years of practicing law, I've learned to recognize natural legal instincts. You have them. The Morrison case wasn't just good research. It was innovative thinking, the kind of creative problem-solving that in-house counsel positions require. I thought about the Morrison case, about those late nights poring over precedents, about the moment when I'd found the connection that no one else had seen. At the time, it had felt like desperation, as much as inspiration, the need to prove myself, to justify the faith Jonathan had placed in me. Would this be a permanent move? I mean, would I still have opportunities to work with Henderson and Associates? You'd be our primary contact at Westfield, actually. It would strengthen our relationship with them considerably. And Lauren? He smiled. This wouldn't preclude you from considering a return to private practice later in your career. In-house experience is invaluable. It makes you a better lawyer overall. I left his office in a daze, the business card he'd given me. Margaret Chen, Chief Legal Officer, Westfield Industries, tucked carefully into my jacket pocket. The meeting was scheduled for the following Tuesday at 2 p.m. at Westfield's downtown headquarters. That evening, I called the one person I knew would be genuinely excited about this development. Rebecca. It's Lauren. Do you have a few minutes to talk? Of course. What's going on? You sound... I can't tell if you're excited or terrified. Both, I admitted, settling into my couch with a cup of tea. Jonathan recommended me for a position at Westfield Industries. The silence on the other end lasted so long I wondered if the call had dropped. Rebecca, Lauren Whitaker, are you telling me that Jonathan Henderson recommended you for a senior counsel position at Westfield Industries? Senior counsel, yes. 40% salary increase, stock options, the whole package. Oh my God. Rebecca's voice rose an octave. Lauren, do you realize what this means? Westfield is huge. They're not just successful. They're innovative. They're ethical. They treat their employees incredibly well. This isn't just a job opportunity. It's a career-defining move. I'm meeting with Margaret Chen next Tuesday. Margaret Chen? The Margaret Chen? Lauren, she's a legend in corporate law. If she's interested in meeting with you, that means Jonathan's recommendation carried serious weight. I felt that familiar flutter of anxiety in my chest. What if I'm not qualified? What if I get to the meeting and she realizes I'm just... Stop right there, Rebecca interrupted firmly. You are not just anything. You're a brilliant lawyer who found a legal precedent that saved our client millions of dollars. You're someone who consistently delivers exceptional work. You're exactly the kind of person who deserves this opportunity. After we hung up, I found myself pacing around my apartment, nervous energy making it impossible to sit still. This was everything I'd worked toward: recognition, advancement, financial security, the chance to work for a company that valued innovation and employee satisfaction. So why did I feel scared instead of excited? I knew the answer, even if I didn't want to acknowledge it. Some part of me was still the 7-year-old girl whose finger painting had been pushed aside to make room for Madison's. Some part of me was still waiting for someone to realize they'd made a mistake, that I wasn't actually good enough for opportunities like this. My phone buzzed with a text message. For a moment, I hoped it might be encouragement from David. I'd mentioned the meeting to him over coffee that morning, and his enthusiasm had been infectious. But it was Madison. Mom says you're interviewing for some corporate job. Does this mean you'll finally be making enough money to help family more regularly? I stared at the message, feeling a familiar knot form in my stomach. Somehow, Madison had managed to take news of my potential career advancement and turn it into a question about what it might mean for her financial benefit. Not congratulations, not excitement for my success, but immediate consideration of how it might serve her needs. I set the phone aside without responding and tried to focus on preparation for the meeting instead. Tuesday arrived with unusual sunshine for Portland in late October, which I chose to interpret as a good omen. I'd spent the weekend researching Westfield Industries, reading Margaret Chen's published articles on corporate governance, and practicing answers to potential interview questions in my bathroom mirror. Westfield's headquarters occupied 15 floors of a gleaming downtown high-rise, all glass and steel and modern efficiency. The lobby featured original artwork from local artists and living walls of Pacific Northwest greenery. Everything about the space communicated success, innovation, and attention to environmental responsibility. Ms. Whitaker, a young woman in a sharp business suit, approached as I checked in with security. "I'm Amanda, Ms. Chen's assistant. She's ready to see you now." The elevator ride to the 14th floor was silent, except for soft instrumental music and the quiet hum of efficient machinery. Amanda led me through an open office space that buzzed with productive energy, people collaborating at standing desks, whiteboards covered with flowcharts and timelines, the kind of environment that suggested both creativity and results. Margaret Chen's office was a corner suite with floor-to-ceiling windows offering a panoramic view of Portland's skyline. The woman behind the desk was smaller than I'd expected, but radiated authority and intelligence. Her silver hair was styled in a sleek bob, and her handshake was firm and confident. "Lauren, thank you for coming. Please, sit wherever you're comfortable." She gestured to a seating area away from her desk, 2 chairs facing each other across a small table, creating an atmosphere of conversation rather than formal interview. "Thank you for meeting with me, Miss Chen. Your office is beautiful. Call me Margaret, please. And yes, the view helps during those long days when complex contracts start to blur together." She settled into her chair, with the ease of someone completely comfortable in her professional skin. "Jonathan Henderson speaks very highly of you. He says you have exceptional analytical skills and creative problem-solving abilities." "That's very kind of him to say." "Jonathan isn't known for empty flattery, Lauren. When he recommends someone to me, I pay attention." Margaret opened a folder on the table between us. "I've reviewed your academic record, your work history, and the case summaries Jonathan provided. Impressive stuff. But I'm more interested in hearing from you directly. Tell me about a time when you had to find a solution to a problem that seemed impossible." I thought immediately of the Morrison case, but something made me pause. Margaret Chen wasn't just asking about legal work. She was asking about problem-solving as a fundamental skill. "About 6 months ago," I began, "I was working on a property dispute that seemed straightforward on the surface. Our client claimed adverse possession of land that had been in their family for decades, but the opposing party had clear title documentation. Every precedent we could find supported the other side. What made you think there might be another angle?" "Honestly, desperation," I said, then immediately worried that honesty might not be the best policy in this situation. But Margaret smiled encouragingly, so I continued. "I couldn't accept that our client, an elderly woman who'd been caring for this land since she was a child, would lose it to a development company because of paperwork technicalities. So I started looking beyond standard property law precedents." "Where did that lead you?" "To a 1987 environmental protection ruling that established different standards for land that had been maintained as de facto wildlife habitat. Our client had been feeding deer and maintaining the natural ecosystem for 40 years, essentially creating an unofficial conservation area. That ruling gave us the legal foundation we needed to argue for continued stewardship rather than development rights." Margaret leaned back in her chair, nodding slowly. "And the outcome? Settlement in our client's favor. She gets to keep the land, and the development company found another site that didn't require displacing an established ecosystem. That's exactly the kind of creative thinking that succeeds in corporate environments, Lauren. In-house counsel can't just apply existing law. We have to find innovative solutions that serve business objectives while managing risk and maintaining ethical standards." For the next hour, we discussed Westfield's business model, their expansion into renewable energy technology, and the legal challenges that came with operating in an evolving regulatory environment. Margaret described the role in detail, overseeing contract negotiations with suppliers and partners, managing compliance with environmental regulations, and serving as the primary interface with outside counsel for litigation matters. "The position would also involve some travel," Margaret explained. "We're expanding operations to Seattle and San Francisco, and legal oversight will require regular visits to those offices." "Is that something you'd be comfortable with?" "Absolutely. I thought about how different this conversation felt from family discussions, where my interests and capabilities were constantly questioned or diminished. Here, Margaret was asking about my comfort level with professional challenges as if my opinion and preferences mattered. I have to ask, Lauren, what draws you to in-house counsel work? Many attorneys prefer the variety and prestige of firm practice. I considered the question carefully. I think I'm drawn to the idea of being part of a company's success story rather than just solving problems after they arise. In-house counsel gets to be proactive, helping shape business decisions, preventing legal issues before they become crises. There's something appealing about that level of integration with business strategy. And what concerns you most about making this transition? Another honest question that deserved an honest answer. I suppose I worry about whether I have enough experience to handle the breadth of issues that come with in-house work. At the firm, I can specialize in specific areas and collaborate with colleagues on matters outside my expertise. In-house counsel has to be competent across multiple legal disciplines. That's a fair concern, and it demonstrates exactly the kind of self-awareness we value here. No one expects you to be an expert in every area of law from day one. We have excellent relationships with specialist outside counsel, and part of this role involves knowing when to handle matters internally versus when to seek external expertise. As the meeting wound down, Margaret walked me to the elevator personally. Lauren, I'm going to be direct with you. I'm impressed. Your analytical skills, your communication style, your approach to problem solving, all of it suggests you'd be an excellent fit for our team. I'll be discussing this with our executive committee, and I expect we'll be making you a formal offer within the week. I felt my heart rate spike. Thank you, Margaret. This opportunity means more to me than I can adequately express. One more thing, she said as the elevator arrived. Jonathan mentioned that you're someone who doesn't always recognize your own worth. I want you to know that we don't make offers to people we're not completely confident in. If we extend this opportunity to you, it's because we believe you've earned it, and because we believe you'll excel in the role. The elevator doors closed, and I found myself alone with my reflection in the polished metal, trying to process what had just happened. Margaret Chen, successful, respected, intimidating Margaret Chen, thought I was qualified for this position. More than qualified. An excellent fit. I walked back to Henderson & Associates in a daze, barely noticing the Portland afternoon bustle around me. This was it. This was the kind of opportunity that could define the next decade of my career, that could provide financial security I'd never imagined, that could give me the professional respect I'd always craved. When I reached my office, I found David waiting by my desk with 2 cups of coffee and an expectant expression. So, he said, the moment he saw me. How did it go? I paused, trying to find words that captured the enormity of what had just happened. I think they're going to offer me the job. David's face broke into a grin so wide it made me laugh despite my nervous energy. Lauren, that's incredible. Tell me everything. What's Margaret Chen like? What would you be doing? Is the office as impressive as everyone says? I spent the next half hour describing the meeting, the office, the role itself. David listened with the kind of attention that made it clear he understood how significant this was, not just professionally but personally. You know what this means, don't you? He said when I finished. That I might be in way over my head, that you're exactly where you're supposed to be. Lauren, 6 months ago, you were worried about whether you deserved a promotion to senior associate. Now you're being recruited by one of Portland's most successful companies. That's not luck. That's talent and hard work paying off exactly the way it should. That evening, I called Rebecca to share the details of the meeting. Her excitement was so infectious that by the time we hung up, I was finally beginning to feel genuinely excited rather than just terrified. But I didn't call my family. I didn't text Madison with the news, or call my mother to share this potentially life-changing development. Instead, I sat in my apartment with takeout Thai food and tried to imagine what my life might look like 6 months from now. New job, new challenges, new levels of financial independence, and professional respect. For the first time since I was 7 years old, I was building something that belonged entirely to me, and it felt extraordinary. The formal offer came on Friday afternoon, delivered personally by Margaret Chen herself in a phone call that left me staring at my office wall in stunned silence for a full 5 minutes afterward. Lauren, we'd like to offer you the position of senior legal counsel at Westfield Industries, Margaret had said, her voice warm but professional. The compensation package is $68,000 annually. That's the 40% increase we discussed, plus full medical and dental benefits, 4 weeks of paid vacation, and stock options that vest over 4 years. $68,000. I'd been making $48,000 at Henderson and Associates, and that had felt like financial stability. This was something else entirely. This was the kind of salary that meant I could stop worrying about whether I could afford both groceries and gas in the same week, could maybe even start saving for a house down payment. The position would begin December 1st, Margaret had continued, which gives you time to finish your current cases and transition your responsibilities. We're also prepared to offer a $5,000 signing bonus to help with any relocation expenses or professional wardrobe needs. Professional wardrobe needs. I'd looked down at my department store blazer and felt a flutter of excitement at the thought of shopping for clothes that made me feel as professional as I was becoming. Margaret, I accept, I'd said, the words tumbling out before I could second-guess myself. But I'm honored by this opportunity, and I won't let you down. I know you won't, Lauren. Welcome to Westfield Industries. Now, 3 hours later, I was still processing the reality of it all. I'd done it. I'd actually done it. 29 years old, and I was about to become senior legal counsel at one of Portland's most respected companies. The girl whose finger painting had been pushed aside, whose college graduation had warranted only an Applebee's dinner, whose promotion celebration had been deemed unworthy. That girl had just landed the job opportunity of a lifetime. I needed to tell someone. I needed to share this moment with people who would understand its significance, who would celebrate with me instead of finding reasons why it wasn't that impressive. David was my first call. Lauren! His voice was bright with anticipation. Please tell me you have good news. I got it, I said, and even though I'd been trying to stay professional, I could hear the joy breaking through in my voice. They offered me the position, $68,000 plus benefits plus stock options. The silence on the other end lasted exactly 2 seconds before David let out a whoop so loud I had to hold the phone away from my ear. Lauren Whitaker, you absolute superstar. This is incredible. We have to celebrate, properly celebrate. Are you free tonight? I'm taking you to dinner somewhere fancy, and I'm not taking no for an answer. Rebecca was my second call, and her reaction was equally enthusiastic. Oh, honey, I'm so proud of you I could cry, she said, her voice thick with emotion. This is exactly what you deserve. You've worked so hard for this, and it's finally paying off the way it should. I keep waiting for someone to call back and say they made a mistake, I admitted. Lauren Marie Whitaker, don't you dare minimize this achievement. Margaret Chen doesn't make mistakes about hiring decisions. If she offered you this position, it's because you earned it completely. That evening, David took me to Le Pigeon, a French restaurant in southeast Portland that I'd always wanted to try but could never justify the expense. We sat at a corner table with candles and actual cloth napkins, and David ordered a bottle of champagne that probably cost more than my monthly grocery budget. And to Lauren Whitaker, he said, raising his glass, who just proved that talent and hard work really do pay off, and who deserves every bit of this success. We clinked glasses, and I felt something I hadn't experienced since I was a child. Pure, uncomplicated joy. No anxiety about whether I deserved it. No worry about who might be disappointed. No guilt about celebrating my own achievements. Just happiness. I can't believe this is really happening, I said, taking a sip of champagne that tasted like celebration and possibility. Believe it. You're about to become senior legal counsel at Westfield Industries. You're about to have your own office, your own staff, your own budget for legal research and outside counsel. You're about to be making decisions that affect a multi-million-dollar company. When you put it like that, it sounds terrifying. It should sound exciting, David corrected gently. You're ready for this, Lauren. I've seen you work, remember? I've seen how you approach problems, how thoroughly you prepare, how creatively you think. Westfield is lucky to get you. Over dinner, duck confit that melted in my mouth and wine that made the whole world feel golden and possible. We talked about everything. My start date, the transition process, what this might mean for my long-term career goals. David asked thoughtful questions about the role, offered insights about corporate legal work from his own experience, and generally made me feel like my success was something worthy of extended discussion and celebration. It was almost 10 p.m. when we finally left the restaurant. Both of us a little giddy from champagne and good food, and the kind of conversation that makes you feel understood and valued. Thank you for tonight, I said as we stood outside Le Pigeon, the Portland evening air crisp but not unpleasant, for celebrating with me, for making this feel as important as it actually is. Lauren, this is important. This is life-changing important. And you deserve to have people in your life who recognize that. David paused, looking at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. I hope you know how remarkable you are. I hope you know that your success isn't an accident or a fluke. You're genuinely talented, and it shows in everything you do. I felt tears prick at my eyes, which was probably partly the champagne, but mostly the overwhelming relief of being seen and valued for who I actually was. That means more to me than you probably realize, I said. Good, because it's true. The next morning, I woke up with a slight headache from the champagne, but an overwhelming sense of possibility. December 1st was 5 weeks away. 5 weeks to wrap up my cases at Henderson & Associates. 5 weeks to prepare for the biggest professional challenge of my life. 5 weeks to figure out how to be senior legal counsel at a major corporation. But first, I needed to tell my family. I'd been putting off this conversation, partly because I was still processing the news myself, and partly because I'd learned to protect my good news from the people most likely to diminish it. But this was too big to keep to myself, and despite everything, some part of me still hoped my mother would be proud. I drove to the house on Maple Street that Saturday afternoon, the same route I'd taken when I'd brought champagne to celebrate my promotion 6 weeks earlier. The autumn leaves were deeper gold now, and there was a crispness in the air that suggested winter was coming soon. My mother was in her usual spot at the kitchen island, but this time she was addressing wedding invitations instead of baking. Madison's engagement to her boyfriend Trevor had been announced 2 weeks earlier, another family celebration I'd learned about through a group text, and apparently the wedding was planned for next spring. "Hi, Mom," I said, settling onto one of the bar stools across from her. "Oh, hello, Lauren. I'm just finishing these invitations. Madison wants them to go out soon so people have plenty of notice." She held up one of the cream-colored cards with elegant script. "Aren't they beautiful? Madison designed them herself. They're lovely," I said, and meant it. Madison had always been artistic, and the invitations were genuinely beautiful. She's so creative. Trevor is lucky to be marrying someone with such artistic vision. My mother set down the invitation and looked at me properly for the first time since I'd arrived. "What brings you by today?" "I have some news to share," I said, feeling my heart rate pick up. "Good news." "Oh," her tone was politely interested, but not particularly enthusiastic. "I got a job offer. A really good job offer. Senior legal counsel at Westfield Industries." My mother blinked, processing this information. Westfield Industries. That's a big company, isn't it? One of the largest tech companies in Portland. It's a significant career move, a 40% salary increase, stock options, full benefits. I'll be overseeing their legal department, managing complex contract negotiations, working directly with their executive team. "That sounds impressive," she said slowly. "When would this start?" "December 1st. I accepted the offer yesterday." "You accepted it? Without discussing it with family first?" The question caught me off guard. "Mom, I'm 29 years old. I don't need family approval for career decisions." "Of course not. It's just, this seems sudden. Are you sure you're ready for that level of responsibility? Corporate legal work is very different from what you've been doing." And there it was. The familiar undermining disguised as concern. The immediate assumption that I might not be qualified for opportunities that came my way. "The chief legal officer at Westfield seems to think I'm ready," I said, working to keep my voice level. "She wouldn't have made the offer if she didn't believe I could handle the role." "I'm sure she knows what she's doing," my mother said, but her tone suggested the opposite. "It's just a big change, that's all. I hope you've thought it through carefully." I looked at her, this woman who had raised me, who should theoretically want me to succeed, and felt something click into place. She wasn't going to celebrate this achievement any more than she'd celebrated my promotion. She wasn't going to recognize this as the life-changing opportunity it was. She was going to find ways to diminish it, to suggest I might not be up to the challenge, to make me feel like I was overreaching instead of succeeding. But for the first time in my adult life, her reaction didn't make me doubt myself. Instead, it made me feel sorry for her. I have thought it through carefully," I said calmly, "and I'm excited about the opportunity." "Well, congratulations then," she said, turning back to the wedding invitations. "I'm sure you'll do your best. Your best, not you'll do great, or I'm proud of you, or this is wonderful news. You'll do your best, as if my best might not be good enough." "Is Madison here?" I asked, changing the subject before I said something I might regret. "She's upstairs looking through wedding magazines. She'll be so excited to see you. She's been wanting to talk about bridesmaids' dresses." I climbed the stairs to Madison's room, the same bedroom she'd occupied since high school, though it had been redecorated several times to reflect her evolving aesthetic preferences. Currently, it was all white and gold with inspirational quotes in cursive script mounted on the walls. "Lauren," Madison looked up from a spread of bridal magazines covering her bed. "Perfect timing. I need your opinion on color schemes." "Hey, Maddie. Congratulations on the engagement. Mom told me the news." "Thanks. Isn't it crazy? Trevor proposed at the waterfront last weekend. He had a whole setup with candles and flowers. It was like something out of a movie." She held up her left hand to display a modest but pretty solitaire diamond. "Look at this ring. I can't stop staring at it. It's beautiful," I said. And again, I meant it. Madison looked genuinely happy in a way I hadn't seen in years. "So what do you think about dusty rose and gold for the color scheme?" "I'm thinking dusty rose bridesmaids. Dresses with gold accents. Gold centerpieces. Maybe some gold ribbon in my bouquet. That sounds lovely. Very romantic. Right? Oh, and I wanted to ask you, will you be my maid of honor? I know we haven't been super close lately, but you're my sister, and I can't imagine getting married without you standing next to me." The request caught me completely off guard, despite all the financial support I'd provided over the years, despite always being available when she needed help. I hadn't expected Madison to choose me for this honor. It felt significant. "Of course," I said, surprised by how much the invitation meant to me. "I'd be honored to be your maid of honor." "Yay." Madison bounced slightly on her bed, and for a moment, she looked like the little sister I'd grown up with, before family dynamics had become so complicated. "This is going to be so much fun. We'll have to go dress shopping, and there's the bachelorette party to plan, and the bridal shower." We spent the next hour looking through magazines and discussing wedding details. Madison was animated and excited, and I found myself genuinely enjoying spending time with her in a way I hadn't in years. Maybe weddings had a way of putting other tensions in perspective. It wasn't until I was getting ready to leave that Madison asked about my news. "Mom mentioned you got some new job offer. Senior legal counsel at Westfield Industries," I said, watching her expression carefully. "Oh wow, that sounds fancy. Is it a lot more money?" "It's a significant increase, yes," Madison grinned. "That's perfect timing. I was actually going to ask if you could help with some wedding expenses. The venue costs more than we budgeted, and Trevor's parents can only contribute so much. I was hoping maybe you could cover the flowers. They're only about $3,000, and with your new salary, $3,000 for flowers." At a wedding I was already committed to participating in as maid of honor, which would involve my own expenses for a dress, shoes, probably a bridal shower and bachelorette party. "Madison, I haven't even started the new job yet, and $3,000 is a significant amount of money, even with the salary increase. But it's my wedding, Lauren. It's a once-in-a-lifetime thing. And you're going to be making so much more money now." I looked at my sister, my little sister who had never learned that other people's financial success didn't automatically become her personal benefit, who had been taught by our mother's example that my achievements existed primarily to serve everyone else's needs. "I'm happy to contribute something reasonable toward your wedding," I said carefully. "But $3,000 for flowers isn't realistic for me." Madison's face fell. "I thought with your fancy new job, you'd want to help make my wedding special." "I do want your wedding to be special. But Madison, you can have a beautiful wedding with less expensive flowers. $3,000 could cover my entire maid of honor expenses and still leave enough for a meaningful gift." "Fine," she said, but her tone had turned cold. "Oh, I guess I'll figure something else out." I left the house that day feeling emotionally drained, despite what should have been a celebratory visit. My promotion to senior legal counsel, an achievement that had made David and Rebecca react with genuine excitement and pride, had been met with skepticism from my mother and immediately converted into a funding opportunity by my sister. But as I drove home through Portland's tree-lined streets, I realized something had shifted. Their reactions still hurt, but they didn't make me doubt myself anymore. I knew the value of what I'd accomplished because I'd seen it reflected in the eyes of people whose professional opinions I respected. Margaret Chen, Jonathan Henderson, David, Rebecca. They'd all recognized my achievement for what it was. My family's inability to celebrate my success was about them, not about me. That evening, I called David to tell him about the conversation with Madison regarding wedding expenses. $3,000 for flowers. His voice carried the appropriate level of incredulity. "Lauren, that's more than most people spend on their entire wedding budget." "I know, and I feel guilty for not being more enthusiastic about helping." But nothing. You're not responsible for funding Madison's wedding dreams, especially not at the expense of your own financial security. You haven't even started your new job yet. I said I'd contribute something reasonable, which is generous and appropriate. Lauren, being successful doesn't mean you're obligated to bankroll other people's expensive choices. We talked for another hour, David helping me work through the guilt and frustration of family dynamics that never seemed to change regardless of my personal growth. By the time we hung up, I felt centered again, confident in my boundaries, and excited about the future I was building. 4 weeks until my new job started. 4 weeks until I began the next chapter of my professional life, surrounded by colleagues who valued my contributions and challenged me to grow, rather than constantly questioning whether I deserved the opportunities that came my way. For the first time in my adult life, I was beginning to understand what it felt like to be valued for exactly who I was, and it felt like coming home. December 1st arrived with the kind of crisp, clear morning that makes Portland feel like the most beautiful city in the world. I stood in front of my bathroom mirror at 6:30 a.m., adjusting the collar of my new navy blue suit, the first piece of my professional wardrobe, purchased with part of my signing bonus, and tried to calm the butterflies that had been dancing in my stomach since I woke up. Today was the day. After 3 years of proving myself at Henderson & Associates, after weeks of preparation and anticipation, I was finally starting my position as senior legal counsel at Westfield Industries. My phone buzzed with a text from David. First day of being a corporate powerhouse. You're going to be incredible. Can't wait to hear all about it tonight. Rebecca had left a voicemail the night before. Lauren, honey, I'm so proud of you, I could burst. Remember that you earned this opportunity completely. And trust yourself. You're ready for this. Even Jonathan Henderson had sent a brief but meaningful email. Lauren, it's been a privilege watching you grow as a lawyer. Westfield is lucky to have you. Don't be a stranger. The support from my professional network felt like a warm embrace as I prepared to step into the biggest challenge of my career. It was a stark contrast to the silence from my family. No messages wishing me luck. No acknowledgement that today marked a significant milestone in my life. But for the first time, their silence didn't diminish my excitement. I'd learned to find validation in the right places, and the right places were filled with people who recognized my worth. Margaret Chen was waiting for me in the Westfield lobby at 8 a.m. sharp, looking impeccably professional in a charcoal gray suit and the kind of confident smile that immediately put me at ease. Lauren, welcome to your first day, she said, shaking my hand warmly. Ready to jump in. As ready as I'll ever be, I replied, and realized I meant it. The next 4 hours passed in a whirlwind of introductions, office tours, and information downloads. My new office was on the 13th floor, with a view of the Willamette River, twice the size of my space at Henderson & Associates, and furnished with the kind of modern efficiency that made me feel immediately professional and capable. This is your domain now, Margaret said, as she showed me the final details of my workspace. You'll have a paralegal assistant, Jessica Martinez. She's been with us for 2 years and knows our systems inside and out. You'll also have access to our legal research database, and we maintain relationships with several specialist outside counsel firms for matters that require particular expertise. She handed me a thick binder labeled Westfield Legal Department Overview and settled into one of my client chairs. I want to be transparent with you about what the next few months will look like, Margaret continued. We're in the middle of negotiating a major partnership with a renewable energy company based in Seattle. It's a complex deal involving intellectual property licensing, environmental compliance, and multi-state regulatory issues. I'd like you to take the lead on the contract review and negotiation. My heart rate spiked. This was exactly the kind of high-stakes work I'd dreamed about, but the reality of being responsible for a major corporate partnership felt suddenly overwhelming. What's the timeline? I asked, working to keep my voice steady. First draft review by end of next week. Initial negotiations begin the week after that. I know it's a lot to absorb right away, but I have complete confidence in your ability to handle it. Margaret's confidence was infectious. Over the next 2 hours, she walked me through the partnership details, introduced me to the business development team I'd be working with, and outlined the legal issues that would need careful consideration. By lunch, I felt like I was beginning to understand the scope and significance of the project. How are you feeling? Margaret asked, as we wrapped up our morning session. Excited, I said, and realized it was true. Nervous, but excited. This is exactly the kind of work I hoped I'd be doing. Good. Trust that instinct. You wouldn't be here if we didn't believe you could excel at this level. That afternoon, I dove into contract review with a focus I hadn't felt since my law school days. The renewable energy partnership involved intricate licensing agreements, environmental impact considerations, and regulatory compliance issues that required careful analysis and creative problem-solving. It was challenging work, but it was also intellectually engaging in a way that made the hours fly by. At 6 p.m., Jessica knocked on my office door. "Ms. Whitaker, I'm heading out for the day. Is there anything you need before I leave?" "Actually, yes. Could you help me understand the protocol for requesting outside counsel consultation? I want to make sure I'm handling the environmental compliance review appropriately." Jessica's face lit up. "Of course. Margaret always says it's a sign of good judgment when new attorneys know what they don't know. I'll email you the outside counsel contact list and the request procedures first thing tomorrow morning." After Jessica left, I continued working until almost 8 p.m., completely absorbed in the complex legal issues surrounding the partnership agreement. When I finally looked up from my computer, the office was quiet and most of the lights were dimmed, but I felt energized rather than tired. I'd spent my first day as senior legal counsel doing exactly what I'd dreamed of: complex, meaningful legal work that required all of my analytical skills and creative problem-solving abilities. And I'd felt competent. More than competent. I'd felt like I belonged. My phone rang as I was packing up my briefcase. David's name appeared on the screen. "So," he said the moment I answered, "how was day one of being a corporate legal superstar?" "It was incredible," I said, and heard the joy in my own voice. "Challenging and overwhelming and everything I hoped it would be. Margaret gave me lead responsibility for a major partnership negotiation. And David, I think I can actually do this." "Of course you can do this." I never had any doubt. We made plans to meet for dinner to celebrate my first day, and as I walked to the elevator, I felt a sense of professional satisfaction I'd never experienced before. This was what it felt like to be valued for my skills, to be trusted with important responsibilities, to be supported in my growth rather than constantly questioned about my qualifications. The elevator doors opened, and Margaret Chen stepped out, still at the office despite the late hour. "Lauren, how was your first day?" "Challenging in the best possible way," I replied. "Thank you for trusting me with the renewable energy partnership. I won't let you down." "I know you won't. And Lauren, don't hesitate to ask questions or request additional resources. We want you to succeed here, which means giving you everything you need to do your best work." As I drove home through Portland's evening traffic, I reflected on how different this felt from my last job. At Henderson & Associates, I'd constantly worried about proving myself worthy of opportunities. Here, I was being given opportunities and supported in making the most of them. The difference was profound. My phone buzzed with a text from Madison. "How was your first day at the fancy job? BTW. Can you call me this weekend? I want to talk about the bachelorette party budget." I stared at the message, feeling the familiar knot form in my stomach. Even on a day that represented a major professional milestone, Madison's first thought was about what my success might mean for her financially. Not congratulations, not interest in my experience, but immediate consideration of how my new position might benefit her wedding plans. I set the phone aside without responding, and focused instead on the conversation I was about to have with David, who would want to hear every detail of my first day, because he genuinely cared about my success and happiness. Over dinner at a cozy Italian restaurant near my apartment, I told David about the renewable energy partnership, about Margaret's confidence in my abilities, about the complexity and excitement of the work I was being asked to handle. "This is exactly what you were meant to be doing," David said over plates of pasta and glasses of wine that tasted like celebration. "You can hear it in your voice. You're energized in a way I've never seen before." "I feel like I'm finally using all of my skills," I admitted. "Like everything I learned in law school, everything I experienced at Henderson & Associates, was preparation for this moment. And the best part is, this is just the beginning. You're going to grow into this role, take on bigger challenges, maybe even make partner in a few years." We talked until the restaurant was nearly empty, and I realized this was becoming a pattern. David and I celebrating my achievements, Rebecca and my colleagues at Henderson recognizing my worth, Margaret and the Westfield team investing in my potential. I was building a support network of people who saw my success as something to be celebrated rather than diminished. The following weekend, I finally returned Madison's call about the bachelorette party. "Lauren, finally," she said when she answered. "I've been wanting to talk to you about this for days, so I'm thinking we should go to wine country for the weekend. Maybe rent a house in the Willamette Valley, do some tastings, have a spa day. It would be so much fun. That does sound fun, I said carefully. What's the budget looking like? Well, that's what I wanted to talk to you about. The house rental is about $1,200 for the weekend, plus food and drinks, plus the spa treatments, plus transportation. I'm thinking maybe $400 or $500 per person. But since you're the maid of honor and you're making so much more money now, Madison, $400 or $500 is already a significant expense. I can't cover costs for other people on top of that. But you're my sister, and you're making like twice what everyone else makes now. I'm making more money, yes, but that doesn't mean I should pay for everyone else's good time. The other bridesmaids are adults who can budget for their own expenses. There was a long pause. I just thought, what's the point of having a successful sister if she won't help make important events special? The comment hit me like a physical blow. What's the point of having a successful sister if she won't help make important events special? Not pride in my achievements, not joy in my success, but disappointment that my professional advancement wasn't automatically translating into financial benefits for her. Madison, I'm happy to pay my share of whatever we plan, but I'm not going to fund a luxury weekend for 6 people just because I got a promotion. Fine, she said, her tone turning cold. I guess we'll have to do something less special then. After we hung up, I sat in my apartment feeling drained and frustrated. Every conversation with my family seemed to follow the same pattern. My achievements were either dismissed as unimpressive or immediately converted into expectations for financial support. But as I looked around my apartment, at the professional success I'd built entirely through my own efforts, I realized something had fundamentally changed. Their reactions still hurt, but they didn't make me doubt myself anymore. I knew my worth because I'd experienced what it felt like to be valued by people whose opinions mattered in my professional life. The next few weeks at Westfield flew by in a blur of productive challenge. The renewable energy partnership negotiations were progressing well, with my contract analysis earning praise from both Margaret and the executive team. I was learning to navigate corporate decision-making, building relationships with colleagues who respected my expertise, and feeling more confident in my abilities every day. 3 weeks into December, Margaret called me into her office for what she termed a progress check-in. "Lauren, I want to give you some feedback on your first month here," she said, settling into her chair with the kind of serious expression that could mean either very good or very bad news. "I'm ready," I said, though my heart was racing. "Your work on the renewable energy partnership has been exceptional. Your contract analysis caught several potential issues that could have caused significant problems down the line, and your suggested modifications have actually strengthened our negotiating position." I felt relief flood through me. "Thank you. It's been challenging work, but exactly the kind of challenge I was hoping for. More than that, you've demonstrated exactly the kind of strategic thinking we need in this department. You're not just reviewing contracts. You're understanding business implications and finding creative solutions that serve multiple objectives." Margaret opened a folder on her desk, which brings me to my next point. "The executive team has been so impressed with your work that they want to expand your role. We're promoting you to Associate General Counsel, effective January 1st. I stared at her, certain I'd misheard. "I'm sorry. What?" "Associate General Counsel. It comes with another salary increase, $15,000 annually, and broader responsibilities. You'd be my primary deputy, involved in strategic decision-making, managing relationships with outside counsel across multiple practice areas. Associate General Counsel. After 1 month, this was the kind of career advancement that typically took years to achieve." Margaret, I don't know what to say. This is incredible. You've earned it, Lauren. Your work speaks for itself." She smiled. "I told you when we first met that we don't make offers to people we're not completely confident in. This promotion is proof of that confidence." That evening, I called David with the news. "Associate General Counsel." His voice rose with excitement. "Lauren, do you realize what this means? You're essentially going to be second in command of the entire legal department at a major corporation. This is huge. I can barely believe it's real," I admitted. "Believe it. You're not lucky, Lauren. You're talented. And finally, you're working somewhere that recognizes that talent and rewards it appropriately." I also called Rebecca, who actually screamed with joy when I told her about the promotion. "Honey, I am so proud of you I could cry," she said. "This is what happens when you work somewhere that actually values excellence instead of just expecting it." But I didn't call my family. I didn't text Madison or call my mother to share what was arguably the biggest professional achievement of my life, because I'd learned that sharing good news with people who consistently diminish it doesn't enhance the joy. It just provides them with new opportunities to make you feel less than you are. Instead, I spent the evening in my apartment, looking out at the Portland city lights and thinking about the journey that had brought me here. 2 months ago, I'd been begging my mother for permission to celebrate a simple promotion. Now, I was associate general counsel at a major corporation, surrounded by colleagues who saw my success as something to be celebrated and built upon. Christmas came and went with the usual family obligations and dynamics. Madison's wedding planning dominated every conversation. My mother continued to treat my professional success as moderately interesting but not particularly impressive, and I found myself more and more comfortable with the emotional distance that had grown between us. On New Year's Eve, David and I went to a party hosted by one of his law school friends. As midnight approached and Portland's fireworks lit up the sky, I felt something I'd never experienced before on New Year's Eve: genuine excitement about the year ahead. "What are you hoping for in the new year?" David asked as we stood on the host's balcony, watching the celebration unfold across the city. I think I'm hoping to continue becoming the person I'm supposed to be," I said. "If that makes sense." "Perfect sense," David replied. "Here's to Lauren Whitaker, Associate General Counsel, and to all the success you're going to achieve." We clinked our champagne glasses, and I realized that at 29 years old, I was finally living a life that belonged entirely to me. A life where my achievements were recognized and celebrated, where my contributions were valued, where my success was seen as something to build on, rather than something to diminish or exploit. My family might never understand or appreciate what I'd accomplished, but I'd found my tribe in the colleagues and friends who did, and that was enough. More than enough. It was everything. As the fireworks faded and the new year officially began, I smiled at the Portland skyline and felt grateful for every moment that had led me here. The girl whose finger painting had been pushed aside was now Associate General Counsel at one of the city's most respected companies, and she'd earned every bit of it. The best part was knowing that this was just the beginning.